piece aspect of it. In my understanding, a concept is good enough if it can be implemented, not merely at a pilot stage. If it can be replicated, it can be scaled. We are extremely fond of pilots in India, despite the fact that most of them either don't fly, literally or otherwise, and we feel that we are a success. The true success of any concept actually depends on its scalability and sustainability. And I would believe that sustainability depends on four important features in a democracy. First of all, it has to be politically acceptable, not politically driven. I will try and explain the difference between the two. Number two, it has to be technologically feasible. Number three, it has to be socially desirable. And finally, it has to be financially viable. Now, financial viability, to my mind, is extremely, extremely important in the context that we are discussing here. Because I don't think CSR is going to travel much distance. Whatever concept that we have in mind should have a business proposition for it to sustain. And I'll give the example of a scheme that I was associated with till a few months ago. It's called the Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. It is arguably the biggest health insurance scheme in the world today, using technology at levels that have never been used, where a smart card is actually printed and issued in a village. It is the first ever paperless health insurance scheme in the world, where all transactions can be tracked. Some people call it a success because the concept of insurance, the concept or the idea of using technology on such large scale was actually implemented on scale. So the scheme covers today around 130 to 140 million people. Scheme seems to be happening. Same would go to financial inclusion, because insurance is also a part of financial inclusion. If it could happen there, we have to look at why it shouldn't happen elsewhere, in other aspects of financial inclusion. I don't have an immediate answer, but during the course of the discussions, probably we can delve upon this issue, that if this scheme could scale to this level. And why I say this is that it has to be a public-private partnership. The private sector does not have the scale. The public sector does not have the efficiencies. And the reason why RSBY happened was that both these were working together. So you have the efficiencies of the private sector and the scale of the public sector, read government, and the scheme happened. So as we discuss and as we look at the future of financial inclusion, I think the partnership part has to be kept in mind. I think the business part has to be kept in mind. I think the political acceptability part has to be kept in mind. I think the technological feasibility has to be kept in mind. I'll stop here, and maybe when the panelists make the presentation thereafter, we can have a discussion on that. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. Actually, my session was a little earlier, but due to some other preoccupations, I am now caught in this session, whereas from TRAI, I am neither a banking or a NBFC sort of stakeholder. But still, I consider that when we talk of financial inclusion, it adds a huge amount of value. So big or small, whatever you consider it, but productivity of a person or value addition to an individual, say by a small amount of money, is tremendously larger as compared to putting that in a capitalized form. This is also a way of looking at the things, at which I modeled long back on normal that sabji wala. If he comes and if he has a little bit of more money, perhaps he can transform his business, make it much more profitable than instead of going for a big refinery or a big industry, similar kind of money having an impact on. So this subject became of much interest to me, and incidentally, being in TRAI, we found that mobile and ICT, they impact financial inclusion, at least they have a potential to, in a big way. And when you talk of reaching to the people, there is no way better than to reach through a mobile phone. And of late, I understand there is a decision which is also going to provide to each rural household a mobile connection through BSNL. This is a news item which was published on 18th of this month in Business Line, which I am quoting really. And mobile as such has a huge capability of transacting money and processing the things as they can, because they are already doing it in terms of their service provisioning and distribution system, almost all the activities. So the real big issue can be that given under certain limitations, means you don't say allow people to transfer 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs of rupees, but allow them to transfer 500 rupees, 200 rupees, 2000 rupees. If you have a limitation and maybe some supervision, some regulations, perhaps non-banking systems can do financial inclusion in a much faster and much deeper penetration can be achieved effortlessly through ICT. And now I think shortly in a couple of years you will be having 2.5 lakh villages which will be covered by broadband by Bharat Broadband Limited. And with BBNL going to that extent, and if hotspots as they have decided now will be created at Panchayat places, then having a smartphone kind of means internet-enabled telephone, mobile phone, will definitely lead to effortless inclusion of vast majority of rural population, rural households, I would say, not population in particular. And given the kind of tele-density in rural areas, which is already over 41%. So I feel that telecom and a little bit of ease in the regulatory norms to make the system going forward, all these can come together and create a big business for the purpose of financial inclusion. Thank you.
I represent Muthoot Finance Limited. So I think our topic for the day is new banks, challenging tasks in new future. Muthoot Finance is a systemically important non-deposit taking NBFC. And we have our presence pan-India. We have 4,400 plus branches. And we have a customer base of 6 million. And every year we are serving around 24 million customers. And our walk-in customers are 81,000 per day. So as far as Muthoot Finance is concerned, we from our beginning have been doing a financial inclusion, because we are disbursing Indian rupees 320 crores per day to our customers who are very small people, and our average loan size is almost 40,000. So anybody who comes to us with a gold jewelry, use gold jewelry, and whatever may be the purpose for his loan, after complying with KYC compliance, after complying with his identification, a loan is given to the customer for a short period of 3 to 6 months. So this way we are helping in financial inclusion, and we are having a self-empowering business model, where customer can take money and he can use the money for his benefit, maybe for a small business, a small shop, for agriculture, for a small rickshaw, or anything, whatever he wants. Because we don't ask any questions about the end use of the funds, but we ensure that he is a KYC compliant customer. Some of the customers who have not seen a bank, who have never gone to a bank, as per 2011 census, 50% of our population do not have a bank account. So we cater to those customers also. We give them loans. We have got different products which include forex, which include inward remittance, which include insurance. So we are having a vision which states that to be the most trusted, globally diversified institution, enriching lives of the masses while contributing back to the society. So we are striving for achieving this mainly to our rural people and urban people also, urban poor rather. As far as Muthoot Finance is concerned, we have a ready-made infrastructure for meeting the banking challenge. We have 4,400 plus branches. So we have been a bank. Actually, we have been a bank, we have been a semi-bank, we have been a partnership bank. And from 2001, we have been a NBFC. In fact, if a license given to us, we will be going back to our roots of banking. Actually, we have been a full-fledged bank, and we are in a position to transform our branches to banking because we have very strong governance standards, we have risk management policies, we have a three-tier governance level, branches, regional offices. We have got 64 regional offices, we have got 2 corporate offices and the head office. So we have got a very strong team of 1,200 auditors who are doing audit of our system and our branches. Almost every month, our auditors are visiting every branch to ensure that higher standards of compliance are maintained as far as RBI standards are concerned. Every customer who comes to us is photographed, his KYC is checked, and everything is done so that there is not a foul play. We try to achieve that. We have already achieved a digital inclusion that we are already having a core banking solution, a HRMS solution, a FAMS solution, fixed asset management system, customers relationship management, and a circular management system. That means whatever is required for a bank license is already available with us, and only little bit of tweaking may be required. And I am very happy to announce that we have a homegrown CBS. So we have our own technology company which provides a CBS to this. Every branch is provided with strict security compliance system like CCTVs and cameras, everything, so that the security which we are maintaining for our customer, which is a delicate and precious security, we take care of that. Actually, we are also giving employment to 25,000 employees, and most of them are sons of the soil. We recruit from the place where we have our branches to ensure that the regional economies are also upgraded and they are pushed forward. So we have a very unique system that we employ 2,900 retired bank managers as our branch managers. We also have retired general managers who are working with us. I am one of them. I retired as GM from Punjab National Bank and working with Muthoot as GM now. We have 2 retired bank chairmen who are also working with us. And these are the people who are giving a training and coordinating, helping, advising the younger staff for their days to come, for their development. In fact, if we go through the inclusion model, providing a bank account is only a financial access. But when there is a sustainable livelihood in the life of a person or his family, only then we can claim that there is a financial inclusion. In fact, we are doing that. Every household in India has some or little bit of jewelry. So anybody can come to us and can have loan from starting from 1,500 onwards, and which is given a very short time of say 10-15 minutes. So I think we have monetized the gold from a inert, you can say, thing to a very, you can say, lifestyle product. Everyone wants to come and have the gold loan. In the end, I would like to say that we have certain core values like ethics, values, which we never compromise. So with these core values, we are serving 24 million customers across the country. Our last year profit was more than 1,000 crore, March 13. We have our presence in Hong Kong, UAE, UK and Dubai. And we have recently had 5,000 crore of inward remittance. I think people have trust and faith in Muthoot. And 5,000 crore of remittance comes to us almost every year. We have recently launched a Muthoot Gold Life policy with India First, and within 3 months we have covered 3 lakh lives in this system. Similarly, we are into foreign exchange business. We are a authorized category 2 AD dealer and a ILDA certified broker. So I would like to conclude by saying that we have a 126 years of track record. We have trust of customers across the country and of the regulators. We are well regulated, excellent prudential strength, and have adequate CRAR. We are a listed company. We were listed in 2011, and in the depressed market, our share was oversubscribed by 25 times. We are under SEBI oversight and RBI monitoring and surveillance. Our integrity and business ethics are highly robust. We welcome the opportunity to grow with India's economy and continue to bring its self-empowering financial inclusion model to all parts of the country, which we call as Inclusion Plus. We are consumer friendly, we are strong on corporate governance, we are inclusive plus, and we are prudentially strong. Therefore, we are looking ahead and waiting for opportunity to build a stronger country and empowering our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, friends. I am Raman Agarwal, Senior Vice President from Shrey Infrastructure Finance. We are basically NBFC. Shrey Infrastructure Finance is classified as an infrastructure financing NBFC by RBI. And having achieved this classification, we have been notified as a public financial institution. And then within the group, we have another NBFC, which is known by Shrey BNP Paribas, which is a joint venture with BNP Paribas Lease Group. And that NBFC is into financing of equipments, all kinds of construction, mining, farm equipment, IT equipment, healthcare equipment, all kinds of equipment. Now, having said that, I would like to broad base the discussion and talk of the need to, first of all, recognize the role of, as Abhijar mentioned in his opening remarks, the role of NBFCs in this whole agenda of financial inclusion. You know, it is, I've been saying it over quite some time. Often when people talk of financial inclusion, people talk of banks and people talk of MFIs. Somehow, NBFCs seem to be missed out. And incidentally, there is an irony to it that even MFIs who are corporates are registered as NBFCs by RBI. So the point I'm trying to make here is that here is an entity, NBFC, some of which have been in business for good 7, 8, 9 decades. We just heard Muthoot Finance being in business for more than 100 years now. It is an NBFC, an entity which has been working in the financial sector, working at the grassroots level, providing the last mile connectivity. If you look at the genesis and the history, there have been, at least if my memory serves me right, 20 to 21 committees set up at various points of time, either by Reserve Bank of India or Government of India, which have gone into regulation and working of NBFCs. If you study all these reports, there is one unifying factor. And that factor is the recognition of the role that NBFCs play in catering to the unbanked segment. In fact, a study wherein I was personally involved has shown that it is NBFCs who first cater to the unbanked segment in terms of providing the credit, their credit needs. And over a period, these unbanked segment mature and use the NBFC track record to become a bankable borrower. So in fact, NBFCs have acted as the conduits for an unbanked person to become a bankable borrower. That's a very important point which needs to be highlighted. When we talk of, and on the other hand, if you see regulations, ever since, you know, the last amendment which happened in 1997, it's been 16 years of regulation. And today, the regulatory framework for NBFCs is almost at par with banks. In fact, the latest committee set up by RBI, Usha Thorat committee, has recommended even further stringent measures to plug the so-called regulatory arbitrage. But if you look at the entire regulatory framework, you have everything that a bank has. We have a KYC norms, you have code of fair business practices, you have asset liability management, you have credit rating, all those prudential norms for income recognition, everything that is applicable to bank is applicable to NBFCs. Talking of financial inclusion, often there are 4 key parameters to it. You have affordability, reliability, accessibility, and flexibility. And if we are to assess NBFCs, banks, and MFIs on these 4 parameters, easily NBFCs seem to stand out. It may sound surprising, but I can say that because banks, yes, are perhaps the most reliable financial entity, undoubtedly, are affordable, but in terms of accessibility, as we've just heard a lot of experts say here, the kind of reach the banks have still not been able to manage. Similarly, you talk of MFIs, they have the greatest accessibility. They are perhaps working at the absolute grassroots level, but when it comes to regulation, it's at a nascent stage. So the question of reliability comes in. Here you have an entity called NBFC, which has been regulated for 16 years at par with banks, which has been in business for more than 7 to 8 decades, and exactly providing that last mile credit delivery. So I think that is a perfect tool and an engine to drive this agenda of financial inclusion. Now, in order to achieve this, there have been certain innovations which the sector has come up with. For example, I just quote, all of these are well known to you. Take the examples of refinancing or financing of reconditioned, used, second-hand vehicles or equipment. Gold loans, we just heard Muthoot Finance talk. These are all innovations which has come up from the NBFC sector. Our own company, Shrey, was the first one to set up the first construction equipment bank in India. The need came just from, operations. We just felt we were funding equipment, so there was a gap between the availability and demand and supply. So we thought, okay, why not create a bank where if I have a surplus equipment, I just go and park my equipment in the bank, and somebody needs it, he's given it on rent. So it's something absolute, unique, innovative products. When it comes to flexibility, you have the kind of products which the NBFCs, in terms of repayment schedules, in terms of flexibility in the cash management systems, in terms of the IT systems, all that has been shown. Having said this, of course, the next interesting question, why then become a bank? Yes, Shrey Infrastructure is also one of the applicants for the new banking license. And the need arises out more because of certain regulatory and certain, I would say, environment which prevails in the country, which puts NBFCs, just because they are an NBFC, at a disadvantage vis-a-vis banks or housing finance companies or cooperative banks. Those issues, just to list, are number one, related to funding. Number two, relating to taxation. There are certain tax benefits which are given for the same transaction. If I am a HFC or if I am a bank, I get certain benefits. But if I am an NBFC, I don't get those benefits. Similarly, in terms of recovery, we have the likes of SARFAESI Act and the DRTs, which are applicable to banks, which are again applicable to HFCs, which are again applicable to cooperative banks. But somehow, NBFCs are missed out. So it is these challenges which have driven us to go and apply for a banking license, because we feel if we get that license, having the inherent quality and strength of serving the last mile, providing that last mile credit to the unbanked segment, if we are able to get these additional tools, perhaps we can serve this agenda of financial inclusion in a much better manner. Thank you.
The lunch was pretty good. 26 applicants is the post office. While I'm very conscious of this fact, the post office looks at the banking license as some sort of a destination. We are also focused on in fact, we are more focused on the journey, that is what we are doing now, than the destination, that is the banking license. Now, what we are doing now, of course, you may not know me, but my organization knows each one of you. Whether you sit in the front, whether you sit in that corner, the post office, if somebody sends a registered letter, the postman delivers it to you. So, all of you are our customers. The entire population, 1.2 billion, is a customer. They are all customers of the post office. But here, we are talking of financial services. The post office also happens to be the oldest non-banking financial institution in the country. I'm sorry about my voice. I have a little voice problem today. The post office is, like I said, the oldest non-banking financial institution in the country. It is also the largest. So this journey I was talking about, it could be from the oldest non-banking financial institution to the latest bank. But I would rush to add, we are in the line. We have not become the bank yet. Because of the constraint of time, I would restrict to 2-3 bullets. First, I would like to float one concept to you, which is not a new concept, but it is less discussed in India. This is called the post bank. There is a subspecies of the bank, retail bank, or the species of bank. There's a subspecies called post bank. It is there in most countries. You look at any major emerging economy, Brazil, China, South Africa, they all have a post bank. You look at the developed countries, most of them have. France, Japan. In fact, the Japan Post Bank is one of the biggest banks in the world. So in India, so far the post office, of course the post office savings bank is familiar, but it's a bank only in name. It's not actually a bank. It's a small savings mobilization organization. But the network is there. All we need is to equip the network to become a post bank. So what are the features of the post bank? Can we actually classify the post bank as a distinct group, as a distinct category of banks? The answer is yes, because in the last decade, some of the post banks have made tremendous advances. Post Bank of China, which is a very, very recent bank, they have barely completed 5 years, a little more, but in terms of actual operations. And they are doing tremendous work. But China is a different case altogether, because the government decides that the post bank will be a success, and it will be a success. But China is not an isolated case. We have the example of a country like Vietnam, quite comparable to India in terms of stage of development. Post Bank is doing fabulous job. Post Bank is essentially a retail bank, and one characteristic which was mentioned here in a different context, which distinguishes post banks, the new successful post banks, is the use of technology. They are into mobile banking in a big way. They are into internet banking. They use technology in a big way to reach all citizens, I mean, people with, in the lowest economic strata. So as a category, they are a retail bank. Another characteristic feature is accessibility. The neighborhood post office. The post office is virtually at the doorstep. Everybody knows where the post office is. The bank is, most of the time it is co-located, or the post office does correspondence work for the bank, for the post bank. So accessibility is another feature. The third one is frugal operations. Post offices are not known to be, expensive places. It's not a plush environment. All post banks, they operate on frugal economies. Another one is a philosophy of universal service. Like I said, the entire population of the country are my customers. The post office believes in universal service obligation, which is a very important consideration in financial inclusion. We have emotional and psychological issues also involved. The bank should be accessible, the bank should be seen, and it should appear to be accessible. So that's where the post office is slightly different. So this is one concept which I wanted to put forward to the audience, how post office makes a separate category of retail banks. Now coming to the role being played by Department of Post, by the Post Office in financial inclusion, I would just throw a few numbers at you. The number of points of presence across the country, 1.55 lakh. Number of customers, 26 crores, more than the population of most countries. Total deposits which we are managing, or with us, rupees 6 lakh crores. Number of points of presence in rural areas, 1.39 lakhs. Number of people served from post office as low as 6,000. So, whichever way you look at a delivery channel for financial inclusion, I think one need not go beyond these numbers. Now the question is, in fact, I wanted to come to Abhishek's question. Right, okay. He has given me the signal. So, thank you.
This is the Microfinance Institution, Ashoka Chatterjee here. Much have been talked about regarding financial inclusion since morning, and we all know that less than 50% of Indian population is having a bank account. And out of that, hardly 26% is women. Now, in the financial market, we do have the very established players like the commercial banks. We have NBFCs, various types. And MFI is a particular type of NBFC. There are rural banks, there are cooperative banks, and so on. But after so many years of banking service being given, we still find that government is still talking about, everybody is talking about that we need to bring in our fold all the excluded persons. Why it is that it has happened so? Banks means business, they do open branches, they do banking, but then the cost is a huge obstacle for them because they have got staff working in the rural areas. It's a very costly proposition. Then as Reserve Bank has given them a suggestion or instructions, okay, they can take the help of BCs, banking correspondents. That too have been tried or being tried in a big way, but not to big success. What is happening is we in the just previous lunch session we heard that through our various government money that is being now these transfers happening, these are happening through such accounts. But in the end of the day, it's almost a zero balance because the money comes and they take away the money. If that be the case, then for the banks, these accounts doesn't prove to be viable for them because there is a high maintenance cost. So there is various reasons, in spite of best efforts, that this purpose is not being, fulfilled. Now, probably here comes the role of an MFI. MFI works, just before that, my friend has told that they are in every nook and corner of the country. The reach is huge. Now, what is the difference between a bank and an NBFC? An NBFC can take care of customers in a grassroots level, many cases, and it has got a local touch. But whereas as a bank, it's a little distant proposition. But an NBFC, most of the cases, cannot take deposits from the public. So there is a big a weakness that the system has inherent to it, that the NBFCs, particularly the MFIs, they're totally dependent on the banking system for getting their resources. Now, if you have to go ahead with this idea of spreading financial inclusion, then you must have access to resources. Therefore, I feel that either they be allowed to take thrift deposit or something, or they be allowed to get converted into the bank. Now, to get converted into a bank, then what are the things that they need to do? Now, the strength lies there. Now, if I talk about Bandhan, Bandhan is having almost 48 lakhs borrowers with them, a huge number. They are having more than 1,800 branches spread across India, but very strong in the eastern belt. Now, with this customer base, now if they are allowed to do banking, now these many 48 lakhs customers, 48 lakhs borrowers is the base they can start with. And these people can get the benefit of the banking. Now, why are they not getting it? We did a voice of customer. We did a survey. And what did we get out of that? These poor people, they say, we can't go to a bank. Why? We are afraid to enter there. Second, processes are too long, too many papers. We don't understand. Third, opportunity cost is very high. They have to travel a long distance, go to the bank, they have to spend a lot of money and then do it. So these are the obstacles. They don't understand the language because sophisticated people sitting there, they cannot come down to their level and talk to them. They're afraid. So these are the obstacles which can be overcome by people, by the, I should say, the foot soldiers who work with the MFIs. They can reach out to these people, they can mingle with them, they can talk their language and really have the trust of these people. So this is a very basic thing which an MFI has. And what are the challenges then lying ahead? If at all, I say at all because if they are given a permission to become a bank, the challenge is to upgrade the skill level of this huge staff. See, Bandhan itself is having almost 13,000 staff. So upgrade their skill, take other expertise, and then go ahead and then also take care of the infrastructural problems that is existing in India. Different distant location, deep pockets, there are hardly infrastructure available where you can have all ICT models functioning there properly. So these are the huge tasks, but we are very, very confident that given the opportunity with all the people around, it is going to be a grand success. Thank you.
Good afternoon, friends. I'm thankful to the organizer for giving this opportunity and creating this kind of seminar wherein on one hand the RBI is scrutinizing the applications of the various applicants for the banking license, but we can share our views what we thought it was necessary to have the banking license per se. I represent Tourism Finance Corporation of India, which is a specialized institution created by Government of India for providing long-term funding to the tourism-related projects. We have done all kind of innovative products in the tourism sector. Maybe it's the first water park, maybe it's a palace on wheels, maybe it's funding for the heritage products, or any other products which you can think of innovative nature in this country. And our basic role predominantly over the period of time is to create tourism infrastructure. I'm happy to say that out of the total room capacity created in this country, almost 40% has been financed by Tourism Finance Corporation of India. Now, while we were doing all these projects, we could accumulate various strengths. Mainly, these projects, most of the projects, at least 70% of the projects which we have funded, they were into the small and medium enterprises. Now, what we realized, when we do a project, not within the town, let us say outside the town area, this project not only gives opportunity to the product owners, but it gives opportunity to so many other downstream projects and upstream projects also. There are various linkages. Let me give you a practical case. When we did Mukangarh project, Mukangarh is a very small town in Rajasthan on the way to Delhi to Bikaner. It was a fort development there. Once the fort became operational, the entire economy of the village around that area that changed. Why it changed? It gave an opportunity to all the vendors from the nearby areas to sell their product to that particular fort. It created an opportunity for tourist operators to take tourists from Delhi airport, not directly to the Bikaner, but to give overnight support to that. In that area, there were various Havelis, old Havelis, which has intricate designs. So this created an opportunity for the local bullock cart owners to take the foreign tourists to these places where they paid a small sum as an entrance fee and they could enjoy the Indian culture. It even gave an opportunity to the folk artists to perform for these people, and it became a regular thing or regular income earner for various people in or around that area. It is something akin to the total area development approach. Now, out of the 600 projects which we have funded so far, almost 300 projects or more than that, they are into these kind of areas, which were taken for development for the first time. Now, where is the last mile connectivity for these downstream projects and the further projects which are associated with them? This is something which is very much lacking. Even today it is lacking. It's not been there. So, what we think, there is a great opportunity in funding the small and medium enterprises in the country, throughout the country, not only in tourism sector, but even in the manufacturing sector, even in the services sector and other sectors. To cater to that requirement, we thought of having a banking license so that we can take the benefit of these 600 products, 600 units which we have funded. They can become the anchor, and through that, all the people associated with them, they can also enjoy the benefit of the banking. When I say banking or when I say financial inclusion, we do not mean that financial inclusion is just allowing a person to have a banking relationship or banking access. What we mean, banking relation should result into the creation of wealth through the creation of employment opportunity. So ultimately the model which we have proposed is that wherever we will create a branch, we will create opportunity for the beneficiaries to have a learning experiences also. That will be through the trainings, through other means, through creating the necessary infrastructure with the help of other institutions which are working in that area, so that these people can also be. And we believe that the main anchor for us will continue to be the tourism sector. Even when we go for the banking, tourism will continue to be the main anchor for this particular bank. And it will be catering not only to the requirement of tourism, it will be catering to the requirement of hospitality, it will be catering to the requirement of education in second year or third year onward. So it will be, as he mentioned in the initial remarks, opening remarks, we do not believe that you have to be very large to service. You have to be moderate, or you have to be rather from the smaller scale, you can scale up at a later stage. So in the initial years, we do not contemplate having very large network of branches. We will be gradually growing, but remaining focused on tourism with assistance from the other sectors. Thank you very much for giving us.
Thank you, sir. We finally have a technology view from Mphasis.
Welcome to the new branches, iOS, BlackBerry, Windows. I think this is the ad which I saw from the airport when I was driving to this venue. So one of the large private sector banks in India has launched their mobile applications. By 2015, it is said that all banks will have their app stores, like we have an app store for Apple, Google has it for their operating system. So my name is Vilas Kanyal. I represent Mphasis, a technology company. What I'm going to talk to you today is about new banks and how technology is going to really differentiate themselves. A couple of points. The new banks, hopefully the license will be out in Jan, and I think many of them have already their business plans ready, their technology plans ready. we are talking to many of them. How will they differentiate? See, they have defined target operating models with operations and technology, which will be highly automated, low on cost, and robust in technology. They will have different operating models for low cost products and for high cost products. Very important. They would use different utility models. I think gone are those days where people used to spend millions of dollars acquiring systems. You know, pay-per-use or OPEX models is what they will actually adopt. So they'll be very, very competitive as compared to the existing banks. So existing bankers, watch out. Okay? The approach which they will use is a consortium-based approach. They will tie up with a technology vendor and say that, you know, we will partner. They may not have a financial partnership or a joint venture which the RBI will not allow, but they will have partnership. Look at the telecom revolution in India. Many of the large telcos actually partnered with large outsourcing companies, and they outsourced their entire network infrastructure, IT infrastructure, back office infrastructure. So they will have very, very cost-effective models, highly scalable models. Okay? So they will kind of leapfrog over a couple of technologies. Most importantly, they will have a ground-up technology, ground-up digital strategy. What I mean by ground-up digital strategy is that in a erstwhile internet age, you know, we had books, then people digitalized it and said, I will have an e-book, okay? And so on and so forth. There are zillions of examples. No longer. I think the new age banks will have new products, new applications which will be specifically targeted to be delivered in a digital way, be it on the internet, be it on the mobile, be it whichever way. Self-service will be the order of the day. I think this statistics would be familiar to you, but for the benefit of those who may not know, a transaction cost in a branch costs about 40 to 60 rupees. I'm talking about Indian statistics. An ATM transaction costs about 14 to 17 rupees. A contact center, a call to a contact center costs about 8 to 10 rupees. But if you do a same transaction, if the customer does the similar transaction or through an internet or a mobile, it just costs 50 paise. So I think the banks will push a lot of transactions to the internet or to the mobile. Second thing is straight through processing. I think many processes which are there, you know, require a lot of intervention. What will really happen is that usage of straight through processing with homogeneous platforms will be the order of the day. Currently there are heterogeneous systems. I have A system here, B systems here, and C systems there, and multiple hands-off. So straight through processing is still a distant dream. Am I saying that branch will not be required? No, I'm not saying that. Branch will definitely play a very, very integral part in the new branches. But the branches will be different. The look and feel will be different. They will do what I would call as a differentiated banking, differentiated services, differentiated set of people. I think that those are the services which the branch will provide. Branch will no longer be the focal point for the bank. Customer will be the focal point for the branch. Everything will revolve around the customer. First time resolution, or as FTR as it's known in the technology world, would ensure that any issue is resolved first time around, and to ensure that there is a lot of stickiness to the customer, all the issues are resolved, and you have a high level of customer satisfaction. A very interesting anecdote, basically, a bank in Australia has modeled it around an FMCG company. They have brand managers for each of their brands. They are working as an FMCG company. They say that, okay, I think that's the way I will go to the market. And a couple of last points of how these banks will kind of differ in the next couple of years and decades. They will use big data or analytics, and I'm using IT jargon, but analytics is very familiar. Analytics will be a very, very important tool which they will have, and because banking is a very, very data-intensive industry, okay? They will use analytics for getting customer insights, for regulatory compliance, and for risk management. And I think we talked about in the morning that, we have 800 million subscribers in the country and 200 unbanked customers. With the internet penetration going up, use of 3G and hopefully 4G in the couple of months, broadband being the order of the day, internet banking, mobile banking will be the order of the day, and most of us here use smartphones. I think it's only a matter of time where you have cheaper smartphones available, which people en masse would use that. A last point, I think customer relationship management, a very important point with advanced analytics, will also be used to upsell and cross-sell products. The future banks will use that. As per statistics, a current public sector bank or a private sector bank customer in India uses close to about 2.2 products from a particular bank, as compared to a global average of 6. A good customer relationship management system will definitely help to really mine the customers more effectively. So in conclusion, what I have to say is that, technology would be a great enabler, would be the key enabler for the banks, and they will come up with innovative models. Existing banks needs to really up the ante and really get their technology landscape upgraded. Thanks.
Thanks, Vilas. And thank you, everybody here on the panel. I think it was a fantastic view of what people are wanting to do, a very good view from the government. We spoke about how they're actually doing the inclusion piece. On the telecom industry, and I have a few questions for Rajiv. But also a variety of NBFCs and what they are doing. One thing that I can't help thinking after hearing at least all the NBFCs is that I'm not sure whether, I hope the government issues the right amount of licenses, but whether he issues or doesn't issue one, we are left with so much of deep analytics which has already been done, and so many new product innovations that are already on the table, that I'm sure the existing banks will roll them out, for sure. So I'm sure that we won't have a plethora of innovation within financial services happening. Just one question, and this is mainly to Rajiv and to Vilas. What do you think is the possibility within the regulatory framework and the acceptability framework of a telecom bank ever coming up? So can I ever see an Airtel bank or a Vodafone bank existing in the system?
Banking, as per the present regulations, do not allow any interest in any other industry directly in the same entity. So to that extent, this is practically ruled out. However, payment systems do exist in the form of, you can say, Airtel Money or M-Pesa. So those things are also having a lot of utility for a section of people. But there is another possibility that they are like semi-closed wallet, or they are not having a cash out facility. And that is the major limitation which the telecom companies had been raising all along whenever we were talking to them about this mobile banking and all. But that is in the ambit of RBI to decide. And as we understand that they had some concerns about money laundering and frauds and KYC issues. So to that extent, perhaps a good solution that can be thought of is, as I told in the beginning, to have a limitation. Means you don't make a free-for-all type of thing, but you may say that, all right, limited to 4,000, limited to 2,000, limited to 5,000, some limitation which can be dynamically reviewed. And because KYC with the advent of Aadhaar will slowly get its roots, that across the country KYC issue will be by and large getting settled. And with that, these things will become very handy.
Yeah, so I think the next war will be fought on who owns the customer. Okay, so if if you look at it, telecom and banking are the ones who own a lot of customers. My personal view is that, but for the regulatory issues, okay, I think if RBI and TRAI can get on the same table, we know what happened with IRDA and RBI.
Now, let me tell you an interesting model, the Kenyan model. In Kenya, for example, which is the highest amount of telecom banking that happens in Kenya, and the underlying political fact is that the telecom sector is far more aggressive and far more important compared to the banking sector in Kenya. So it's very easy to implement that because the telecom companies, MTN in particular, had the advantage of saying what it wanted to say. And the banks were the more weaker ones. However, if you come to India, the situation is a little different. We have a very robust and a very mature banking system. And frankly, our need to actually push the telcos to do something is less.
Correct.
So that's really the point that I was
Absolutely. Add a few points to that. The real issue is that when you talk of financial inclusion in this context, that value of the transaction, because the people are poorer people, the value of the transaction is small. And when the value of the transaction is small, cost matters. And when the cost matters, as it was pointed out, 50 paisa versus whatever, maybe 50 times, 100 times cost in a banking branch. So the viability of banks to reach to all the corners, even in India, despite of having a very robust banking system and regulations in that regard, that will always be an issue, and that will always be limiting factor for getting into this financial inclusion without the help of alternatives to the banking.
Okay, second question that so you have something to say?
I would just like to supplement what my friend was saying, that as Muthoot, we have already been given a permission for 9,000 white label ATMs, so which we'll be installing in rural and semi-urban areas, where I think every common person can reach there, and it will also help in financial inclusion.
Right.
We are talking so much of telecom companies and all that. Who will do the financial literacy?
The financial interests of telecom?
Who will do that?
See, there are two issues. One is financial literacy awareness, and second is making the products. These two essentially had been the domain of banking and non-banking finance companies. However, reaching to those people with financial literacy, we have recently seen a disaster in Andhra Pradesh especially for microfinance companies. Microfinance is the right word, I think. So if they are not properly educated, they soon got over-indebted, and then the entire model collapsed. So yeah, I'm not contradicting that. I'm supporting that. So financial literacy, awareness, and making right products for the people to use, they will be the basic requirements at any time in such environment. However, I'm not saying that we go for telecom companies to become banking companies directly, but however, they can have collaborations and they can form outfits which can serve this purpose easily because they have reach. They have a distributor, they have a retailer which is already serving those people, and they are having financial transactions taking place at the moment. Thanks.
Right. Another question, all the NBFCs spoke about their business models and what each of them do really. A question, again, linking it, what I couldn't help thinking about is that as Anilji said, they are socially acceptable and economically viable. And they've always played a great role in society. And they are profitable, and they serve a banking or financial services ecosystem where the banks are at the top and the NBFCs serve the last mile customer. Why does that really need to change? If it's a model which is working, it's profitable, and it's not profitable for the banks though, it's profitable for you, why would you want to change it?
No, I think that's exactly the point which I said during the last part of my talk. it's more out of, you can say it's out of compulsion. If you see the kind of regulatory framework I touched upon, there is a definite lack of level playing field. You talk of funding, for example, I just quote, 2 years back, all, bank funding to NBFCs for on-lending to priority sector is no longer priority sector for banks. The securitization guidelines are extremely stringent for NBFCs. Public deposits is out. Debenture raising has again been restricted by banks. So the funding sources are getting dried up, number one. That's key point. Two, you come to taxation. When it comes to taxation, a bank has an NPA, NBFC has an NPA. The borrower might be the same, but the Income Tax Act gives certain benefits to banks that the provisions which they make against.
Let me reframe the question.
Yeah.
My question is, will you be able to serve the way you are serving if you became a bank?
Yes.
It's really that.
Yes, because it will be, I think, yeah.
I don't think that's the issue. I think the point that he's making is very pertinent. You have to give a level playing field, and I think deliverables will be as good as the banks. But the point that I would like to raise here is, who is the focal point of our discussion? Is it the audience sitting here, or the urbanite who already has a bank account? And all that has been mentioned by the gentleman from the Infosys is people who are already into the banking. I think a very pertinent point was made with regard to those that are not covered by the banking system now. That really needs to be discussed. Because the business correspondent model that was experimented in some of the states did not work. And there are good reasons why it didn't. We have to think of a model to reach out to those that are not covered by the banking system, and that is financial inclusion. I mean, if we are including already the included ones, and with the improvement of technology, I'm bringing down the cost, very good. We should do that. We should make life easier for ourselves. In any case, there's a very comfortable room to sit in. If we can make it more comfortable through technology, nothing like it, smartphones and whatnot. But the key is, how do I reach out to the man at the lowest level? And that's where a little experience that we've had in the scheme called Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana, where we have actually reached out to the poorest of the poor by issuing a smart card to him, and the number is 140 million. So there was this attempt to reach out to these people. Now, I'm not saying that's the model for financial inclusion on a larger scale, but I think something of a similar type of reaching out, including what Madam said here, in terms of educating him on how to use it. It's sometimes the ideas are great. In India, we are very fascinated with ideas. Udan Khatolas and Agni Bars, they get, done somewhere else. The Wright brothers made the aeroplane. But we are great at ideas. Yes, we should have ideas. We should imagine. There's nothing wrong in imagining India. But the point is ultimately what you do in India that matters. And what we do in India is for the people who have not been able to be included in the financial part of it. That's the challenge that all of us have here. And my request to all of you as you go around discussing today and tomorrow, when we talk of financial inclusion, we have to look at the operational aspects of how do I actually include him. And also look at why is he not getting included. Because so many experiments have happened, and the inclusion part is not really happening. The experiments that happened in Andhra Pradesh through other institutions, he was naming some institutions, didn't work out. There are huge problems in that. That is what that really needs to be debated. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the need of the hour is to serve the unserved and the unbanked. But that is what NBFCs are doing, especially the Muthoot Finance. So anyone who doesn't have a bank come to us, can transact and can do the business. So if that person who comes for a small loan, if he's asked to open a saving account, he will be too glad to do that. Because if he has to carry the money, then it will be difficult for him. He may be robbed on the way. He may lose the money. I think he'll be too happy to have a bank account and keep his money there and utilize as and when required. So I think NBFCs are in a better position with their customer base. Like we have 81,000 customers. If they come, if I can tap 10% of them on daily basis and have their saving fund accounts, it will be doing wonders. So I think we are in a position to come to a level we can have the banking habits in our unbanked people and unserved people. Thank you.
Before I just open it up to the audience, and I'm going to open up in 1 minute, I'll just make one observation. I had spoken with one of the farmers in Kerala, and I told him, why do you go to an NBFC to actually pledge your gold. You pay up higher when the bank next door is cheaper. And it was cheaper. And his answer was that when do I pledge my gold, etc.? When I am in complete dire straits. The day I go, I need to get the money back. If I go to an NBFC, I actually get money and come back. If I go to a bank, I come back with an application form. And I think that was the big difference. I don't want it argued, but I'd like to open it up to the audience just for questions.
My name is Deepak Bhatia. I'm from Infosys. I think you brought out a very good point that why not a telco become or whatever, a bank, etc. And I'm not saying in this debate, it's supposed to be coming out that NBFCs can be the answer for all the banks could not reach beyond 200 million, so NBFCs will reach. But there is the flip side of the story can be that if they have to become bank, they will also start behaving like banks after some time. So then the same problem. So in my mind, answers are, financial inclusion, there's no single answer. There has to be mobile banking, there has to be everything put together. So, and one thing which came out very clearly, but for regulator today, trying to loosen up, and I am privy to this fact that there is after Raghuram came in, I think the SCW, which we are talking about, cash out, there's some pilot going to happen. So these kind of things can slowly start, and combination of technology and this thing happen. I think that's going to be the answer of all these problems, rather than saying only MDFC can solve or only telco can solve. Everybody has to put together and put their bit in. That's my view on this.
Thank you.
Well, Abiza has a sort of a Pandora's box, and sitting in the center, you see the cabinet secretary who can give the necessary recommendations to people that really make a difference. But imagine a scenario from TFCI, Post Office, Muthoot, and these two, Ashoka and Raman. What's the size of the economy that's going to deepen? And emphasis is a field day. But the problem is that, you see, when you're talking about, I've been traveling around the globe, looking at the Brazilian experience and different kind of experiences happening. As Anilji has rightly pointed out. And many other, there is an agency banking station, which is a very important station to pilot all this down the line. I think game changer will be what he has rightly hit the nail on the head. How do I define what is my need? And the new banking licenses, whether the applicants, there are some certain numbers going around, whether it's 7 or 17. If you look at the comparable statistics, Bangladesh, 150 million, we have about 56 banks. India, we have a regulated 79 banks. I'm not considering the RRBs or another thing. In Nairobi, there are 42 banks. Whereas in Nigeria, from 41, it is now coming to 22 banks. So numbers really do not really matter. We wanted to bring in, because that would have been a lesson to us, James Mwangi, who has been declared by you guys in the worldwide that Entrepreneur of the Year. It was a fun, it wound up almost. Then he started making it come around from 1994 onwards. It's the fastest growing bank in Africa today, including Beacon, Standard Bank and other banks. So he started with an MFI community. So basically it all requires how you size up your community, what is your outreach program, and how you are going to use the technology. That has to be the challenge across, and I think let's look ahead with the game changer competition. Postbank, there could be a lot to talk about your postal banking service, and in fact I raised the question to your Postmaster General 3-way, but you are the ideal guys to start the prepaid system, which we have been holding back and back and back, and even State Bank of India, they have applied for a license, and it took 7 months to get a permission to issue a prepaid card. That is not regulation. It's basically holding back. We ought to drive. There are highways. We ought to drive ahead.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, and on the panel. And thank you, audience, for being so good with us for the last 1.5 hours. Sorry, we have one more question. I'm so sorry. I didn't see you.
Sir, I am from Union Bank of India, sir. Sir, in Delhi there is a place named, there is a very famous Nigam Bodh Ghat. There is a place in Delhi, there is a Nigam Bodh Ghat. That is the biggest crematorium place in Delhi. Adjoining to that ghat is a shelter house. There we organized Aadhaar as well, Aadhaar enrollment as well as opening of accounts of the residents. When we interacted with them, we came to know that they are having handsome per day income, 400 to 500 rupees. They are engaged in different services, catering to whitewashing to different services. But they are unable to open accounts with the banks. So my question arises, what type of NBFC have some type of, what type of method NBFC have to deliver services to them? Thank you, sir.
For their loan requirement, they can come to any of our branches and they can have a loan. And for if they want to have their resources, money kept with us, we have IPOs. They can subscribe as low as 10,000 rupees through our NCDs. So they don't need a bank account for that. They can invest, get good return up to 12%, and then have loan also without having a bank account.
So again, my question is, they are very illiterate.
Sir,
They don't have.
I got your point. Let me try and answer.
They have
what you-
hesitation to they have hesitation to contact branches.
Right.
So basically, reaching them is the biggest question.
So we have our field staff who goes to them, who reaches to them, and they can make them understand. We have our forms in local languages. They can understand that. There is no problem.
I think what you are trying to address is the issue of investing rather than they borrowing. They want to invest. They could be potential investors in terms of making small investments. That would directly link to what I was trying to hint at. It is not the inability or the rigidity of NBFC system to reach out to them, but it is the regulatory driven force which prevents us. If you look at the history, NBFCs have been even accepting deposits. But because of certain reasons, today the regulatory regime does not permit us. I mean, RBI has gone public saying that yes, deposits henceforth should only be with the banks. So it is these kind of regulatory systems which prevent us. That's what I tried to hint at. Good or bad is a different debate.
Sir, I am from State Bank. My question is, when we are having at present BC channel and banks are also present in the market and we are not meeting the requirement of financial inclusion because this is not profitable business in these days. How NBFC will be helping in this case? If I can answer this question. Why NBFCs are there in the sector? It has already been said that there are various sectors, there are various segments which, despite the banks having in existence, despite large number of branches having in existence, are not being able to serve. Now, till 4 years back, tell me which of the banks was interested in giving loan against bullions. If we go 10 years back, most of the banks were reluctant to give advance for purchase of vehicles when ICICI Bank came in. If I go 20 years back, we were not even prepared to give housing loan to outsiders. As a banker, I'm an ex-banker. I know we had limitations at different times. I can quote so many examples. Why after all this microfinance institutions came? What was the need for them to go to the villages and give 5,000 rupees loan or 2,000 rupees loan in case this requirement would have been fulfilled by the banks? Were we not there in the banking system to do it? So there was a gap. There was a gap, and it still exists. And this gap over a period of time has widened further. That is the need why the NBFCs has to come to that sector and fund it.
Just
I
to
tell you,
supplement, I'll just quote one small statistic, and it's recent. One of the leading rating agencies has come out with a report on retail lending, and this report is dated 2010. They say the prediction is that within next 2 years, NBFCs may actually overtake banks in terms of retail lending. If you see the retail lending portfolio. Obviously.
They don't become banks. Now,
that's a rider.
Now
but the point here is, as I think Sir was trying to explain, that yes, there is a definite need. We can't just say that, having a BC model is one way of banks trying to reach out. But that does not squeeze out the need for NBFCs being there. And that's why I cited, go back to history right from 1970s or 60s, right till as latest as 2012. There is a government Ministry of Finance Key Advisory Group report, which again talks of the extremely important need for the NBFCs to remain in the sector.
I would like to supplement a small person. Actually, NBFCs are dealing with masses. A person who has a need of 1,500 rupees, he comes to us. So I think we are actually doing financial inclusion as it is. Because a person who will give a loan of 1,500? Will any bank give a loan of that? 25,000 or 10,000? Somebody wants to go out for settling out. He wants to go out for nursing or anything outside the country. He needs the money for visa or air ticket. Nobody is going to give him. It is only the NBFCs which are giving such type of thing. So it is not a purpose-based. It is only a need-based. We are keeping in tune with the need of the masses. That is why we are there, and we will be there also. Thank you.
I would put it otherwise. So far as the banking is concerned, and the large banks, once bank becomes large, they become more impersonal. The branch manager does not have powers to meet the smaller customer's requirement. He is bounded by the powers granted by his HO, which says these are the rules and regulations, you work according to that. There is no personalized touch, which is the requirement, which is the basic requirement to meet the last mile connectivity, and which is met only by NBFCs and the other institutions and not by the banks. And that is the reason why these things are happening.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks.
Mr. Rajiv Agarwal, Secretary, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, Government of India. Mr. P.N. Ranjit Kumar, Deputy Director General, Rural Business, India Post. Mr. Raman Agarwal, Senior Vice President, Shri BNP Paribas. Mrs. Ashoka Chatterjee, Head Institutional Finance, Bandhan Financial Services Limited. Mr. Rakesh Mohan Diwan, General Manager, Muthoot Group. Mr. B.M. Gupta, in charge and Chief General Manager, TFCI Limited. Mr. Vilas Sanyal, Senior VP, Memphis. I would request Mr. Anil Swaroop to give the mementos to Mr. Abhizar Diwanji. Thank you all. I request you to please step forward for a panel photograph.